Good evening. Welcome to our Municipal Council of Tuesday, April 16th, 2019. We have a full house tonight for a couple of reasons. We are going to recognize someone very special in our community at the beginning of our meeting, and I know that other people are here for a statutory meeting as well. So if you will bear with us, we have quite a nice presentation for a very special couple. So with that, I'm going to ask if there's any declarations of interest on our agenda at this time. And seeing none, I'm going to move to the presentation. So we have Barry and Karen Dempster here tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Karen and Barry and why we're recognizing them tonight. On behalf of Council, I'm very pleased to welcome you two here tonight. We've invited Barry and Karen to join us tonight formally to thank them for the lengthy, dedicated volunteer work in our community. Barry Dempster served many years on the Public Library Board in the capacity of both a trustee and a chair. He continues to facilitate the monthly adult book club, which he founded. I believe it was 2000 that you founded it. A renowned poet and a novelist, Barry has published more than 20 books of poetry, short stories, and 2 novels. He has been nominated twice for the Governor General's Award for Literature and is a respected mentor, teacher, and artist in residence. Barry and Karen are the founders and organizers of the popular Southlake Cinemania film circuit at Silver City in East Gwillimbury. Through this initiative, more than $25,000 has been donated to the Friends of the East Gwillimbury Library, an organization established by Karen Dempster to distribute the funds raised from Southlake Cinemania. These funds were then directed to the East Gwillimbury Public Library to support program enhancements. Other literacy organizations in York Region also benefited from Cinemania as well. I am pleased now to present a plaque to Barry and Karen in recognition for the positive impact they have both had on the East Gwillimbury community. And I'm going to come down and read it to you and present it to you, and then all members of council are going to go out in the hall with you, and we'll have a picture taken out in the hall. Thank you. In recognition of your volunteer efforts as the founders of Southlake Cinemania and Friends of the East Gwillimbury Library, the contribution of your time for the betterment of our community is very much appreciated. We also thank you for generously donating proceeds from Southlake Cinemania to the East Gwillimbury Public Library. And this is from Mayor and members of Council, April 2019, East Gwillimbury. Congratulations and thank you so much. So if members of council, if we'll just leave you for one moment and we're going to go out and have a picture taken, we'll be back in.
Barry and I just wanted to say a few words about Southlake Cinemania and the Friends of the Library. For us, it was a labor of love. And I also wanted to acknowledge all the volunteers that we had, because without them, we wouldn't be what we were. Some of them are here tonight. The people that were volunteers was Sandra. It was started with when Barry was the chair of the library board, and they were talking about how they could raise more money for the library. And he came home and told me about this, and we were already aware that the TIFF Film Center in Toronto was giving people license to have a film circuit for their own up in places besides Toronto. So I said, after he told me this, I said, "Are you asking me to start something?" And he said yes, and we both are film nuts, and it was just so easy for us to put this together. Some naysayers said at the time, "Oh, who would ever want to go to a movie that was showing foreign and classic films on a Monday night?" Well, this person was wrong, because the first movie we showed was 95% full of a 400-seat theater. So we knew we had something. And then we had to keep getting bigger and bigger theaters in Newmarket. When we finished, when we closed it, we had no intention of not continuing it. What we wanted was to have someone else take it over, because we had been doing it for 17 years, and it was a lot of work. It ended up being a lot of work. When we finished, we found, I ran the numbers, and we had raised close to $450,000 for the library in the 17 years we were operating. That summer, I was going around talking to people, about taking over Southlake Cinemania, but it was getting closer and closer to September, when we usually opened. Then I had the fortuitous conversation with former CEO Michelle Elaine about Southlake, and ended with a decision for the library to take it over. In closing, we would like to thank the wonderful film-loving volunteers with whom we couldn't have made Southlake possible. Right at the beginning, there was Sandra Giacomini, who knew a lot of people in the community, and she brought other people in to talk about this project. She's not here tonight. I wish she was. But she was very pivotal in creating the first people that were making it happen. She brought in Anna Payne, who was, they all had jobs to do. So Sandra Giacomini was helping Barry with programming. She'd go to movies and report on them, and he'd decide whether or not we would show them. Anna Payne was in charge of making the tickets, literally making the tickets. Andrew Held was there, and he was handling film distribution. When the canister that weighed 60 pounds to carry into the theater. Jan Ryan sold tickets at the door and managed crowd control. Kyle Vickers took over film distribution when Andrew got sick. Cynthia Leroy had the idea for door prizes. Kathy Summers was the door prize facilitator. Chris and Emilio were greeters and they sold passes with me. Kathy Stanley, who came to all the films and greeted the patrons with her beautiful smile, was there. She later became very sick. Steve Giacomini came along with Sandra, and he was a chief greeter and last-minute ticket person, and he kept us all laughing. He's a very funny guy. Richard McLaughlin, who is here today. Richard, where are you? There. Richard was also a door greeter and a floor monitor. He would walk back and forth at the theater when it was piling in. We always had a full house. After day one, we always had a full house. My job as a co-founder was to do the promotion, design and put up posters around town, brochures, do the website, and manage the website, and be a troubleshooter. Barry's, as a co-founder, did the programming, banking, hosting, and ticket distribution, and theater relations. So everybody had something that they had to do, a purpose, and everybody loved coming to the movies, and loved the movies, and loved what was happening to them when we were there. I'm very happy to see that the Southlake Cinemania is still going on, and it's been adopted by the two libraries, the library in East Gwillimbury and the library in Newmarket. I'm also really pleased to see that the Friends is still going under Catherine's guidance. I left it. The Southlake Cinemania was a big task, and so the Friends of the Libraries was less of a task. And when I learned that Catherine was considering getting charitable status, I thought, this is good. This will go on. And I asked her, if I decided to leave, would she take on the role of the president? And she sort of seemed a little shocked, but but she did take it on, and she's done a marvelous job. I'm just so happy to see that the Friends is still going, and people are on the board and all this stuff. So that's I'm not used to talking and being noticed, so I'll go now.
Thank you so much, Karen, for taking us down memory lane all the years and all the good service that both of you have provided to East Gwillimbury. We will always remember. Thank you ever so much. If there's people that would like to leave, we're going to continue on with our agenda. You're certainly welcome to stay. It could be a riveting evening tonight, but if you'd like to go, we won't take offense to it. Are the Kelsons in the audience tonight? There you are. Very nice. We have another presentation to make tonight, and I'll do it from here and then come down, if that's okay. Would you like to come over to the front here so we can see you? I'm sorry, and your first name is?
Josh.
Thank you. We thought that Josh was going to be here, so my remarks are somewhat to Josh. However, we can create them for you as well.
Thank you.
So we're very pleased to have Kelson's here tonight. Kelson's vice president is Josh, and with Kelson's has been invited to join us so we can formally acknowledge the 75-year anniversary of this family business, George A. Kelson Company Limited. Kelson's is a very successful industrial business located here in East Gwillimbury with approximately 150 employees. George Kelson is the founder of the company. George completed his apprenticeship as a plumber, steam fitter, and sheet metal worker in 1922. That's 96 years ago, almost 97. After working as a skilled tradesman, he recognized the growing need for knowledgeable and efficient businesses. In 1944, with $60 and a toolkit, he decided to go into business for himself, and that was the beginning of George A. Kelson. Working with Beryl Iverson as a partner, the company grew as it gained a reputation for on time, on budget, high caliber plumbing, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning work. In 1982, with the satisfaction of having achieved a successful career, George Kelson retired. The business became a family tradition as his sons Rod, Larry, and Donald, who had been training and preparing for careers in the mechanical contracting industry, took over the success of the business, continued under their leadership. Kelson's continues to be a very successful business in their field and continue their dedication on being one of the most dependable, productive, and professional mechanical contracting firms in the Greater Toronto Area. And I understand it's international now. Is that correct? Today, we acknowledge your 75 years, a true milestone in businesses, and we applaud and congratulate you on their success, wishing many, many more years ahead. On behalf of Council, I'm pleased to present you with this memento in recognition of Kelson's 75th birthday. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Some bullshit.
Will I turn? not very often do we have two presentations like that in an evening when we have statutory public meetings. So thank you for your patience, and you got to see a little bit about what happens in East Gwillimbury when we have volunteers that are important in our community. So with that, I'm going to begin with item D, and that's our statutory public meeting, official plan amendment application for 19180 Leslie Street, and zoning bylaw amendment application for 19180 Leslie Street, 1420, 1432, 1442, 1452, 1460, 1472, and 1484 Mount Albert Road and blocks 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, and 13 on 64M-4512, north of Mount Albert Road, west of Leslie Street in Sharon, part lot 12, concession 2. Submitted by Wycliffe, Thornridge, Sharon Corners, files OPA 1901 and ZBA 1901. Procedural comments at this time. Please be aware that per the Planning Act, if a person does not make representation at tonight's meeting or make a written submission to the town before a decision is made on the proposed application, this person is not entitled to appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal, LPAT, nor will they be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal at the tribunal unless there are reasonable grounds to do so in the opinion of the tribunal. At this time, I would ask for our town planner to bring comments, please.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this point, with respect to the planning applications, we have our planner, Rosanna, who will provide a brief overview of the applications being considered this evening. And then we'll turn it over to the applicant's planning consultant. Mr. Murray Evans is here. He has a presentation, and he'll go through his development proposal. And at that point, then we will open it up to any public comments. And if there are any questions, either Murray or planning staff will do our best to provide any answers at this point. There won't be any recommendation from council this evening. This is really just a public information meeting to obtain public comments, and we will then address those public comments that we hear tonight or we receive in writing at a future date when we do prepare a final report later on this year on this application. So I'll turn it over to Rosanna now to provide a brief overview of the application before Marie takes over. Rosanna?
Thanks. Thank you through the chair. Tonight's meeting, I won't say the addresses again, as the mayor has already addressed all the addresses on this property. So tonight's meeting is for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for Wycliffe Thornridge. So I'll discuss here the location. So tonight's public meeting is actually addressing two items. The first item is 191 Leslie Street, located in blue. This property is going through the official plan amendment application before you tonight. The properties in red have had an official plan amendment done last year. The application for the official plan amendment has been approved by council in August of last year and approved by the region in September of last year. With that being said, tonight's public meeting is also addressing the zoning bylaw amendment, which is on the entire site, including the blue lands as well. So the blue lands is 19180 Leslie Street. So just to clear that up. So there's actually two public meetings happening tonight on the same site. Just for background information, the official plan amendment that was addressed last year and approved by council and the region addresses 7-story retirement home located here, a 7-story apartment building located here, and townhouses to the back. Later in my presentation, I'll have a concept plan showing that in detail. So the current official plan right now, as mentioned, is dealing with the site high density residential approved once again by council in the region. The applicant tonight is looking to redesignate 19180 Leslie Street, located right here, to residential mixed use. Currently it is residential low rise, and they're looking to convert that to residential mixed use. The zoning bylaw amendment before you tonight is looking to rezone the lands. So once again, we're looking at the entire parcel of land. So the front portion, once again, an apartment, 7-story retirement home, an apartment building to the adjacent to that, and to the back, a 3-story townhouses. The site located right on Leslie Street is going to be mixed-use residential. So this is the concept plan, which gives a bit more detail with respect to the lay of the lands. The townhouses, once again, to the back. It is important to note there is a York Region Transformer Station located here, which is not a part of this application. The mixed-use building, the lands right to the corner are not owned by the applicant. So that's part of maybe a future application or just not at all a part of this application. The 7-story retirement home is located right here, and the 7-story apartment building located right here. If you need further information, my contact information is there. If you have any questions, I am here to answer them.
Thank you very much. I believe the applicant is here. Mr. Evans?
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Murray Evans. I'm a planning consultant for the Wycliffe affiliated ownerships here. And as you heard from Ms. Punit, if I can just hopefully weave my way through the miracles of modern science. This is the holdings that have been assembled in by your very reading of the ownerships, Your Worship. This has been a long time coming. And what has happened, if perhaps that's the piece there, what would that be, taupey colored? That darker colored parcel was before council last August to determine or assess the land uses. And at that point, council adopted an official plan amendment, which, as you've just heard, allows for urbanized uses to take place on this property. The property is designated as the Sharon Local Center, and Mount Albert Road is a local, is a corridor. So in this new world that we're in, that the theory and I guess the goals for most municipalities are to create walkable, compact, complete communities. And in doing so, the municipality has established that this intersection is a location where the community should be developing accordingly. So we're quite pleased with the way this is shaping up. As you can see, the high-density residential uses which were adopted and, shall I say, entrenched in your official plan last year allow the opportunities for, as you heard from Ms. Punit, some higher built form along the street, which is where you want it, so people can walk to the street and walk to which will hopefully be the evolving commercial uses either on this site and also to the properties to the south. And it would also provide a great opportunity to create what we hope will be an attractive street edge. And I'll walk you through these plans, but you can see the rendering on the right-hand side is effectively what this would look like from Mount Albert Road. So the objectives are to create this complete community, and we're quite proud that in doing so, we have a retirement home for guys like me who are getting older, an apartment building for, I'll say, general use for people who just want to downside or just want to start off in the housing market, but also some townhouses, which will provide just I'll say a mid-level form of intensification. So once again, we can have people taking buses, using the libraries, using all of the community facilities. And as you heard, the little piece in the middle, this is, I guess, one of the last remaining pieces of the puzzle. And so this was acquired after, in that long process, yet another parcel was acquired by the Wycliffe group. And this was acquired after council had dealt with the official plan amendment, so we're somewhat catching up. As you heard, the 2 yellow parcels are not owned by us, and our task and challenge, as you saw in that little concept, will be to ensure that our development takes place, which will allow our neighbors, and we have met with our neighbors, to allow them to utilize their property to the fullest opportunity. So we believe, and you can see some of the concept that you saw, and this is, I guess, a concept. It's to be changed, as are the elevations as we work through the municipal planning process. You may see changes. But we have, try not to get anybody's eyes in the way here. We have the retirement home here. That is, there are arrangements Rivera, and it's very important, if I can ask council to park that for just 1 second. We have some higher built form, once again, along the arterial road. These are a condominium townhouse in the sense that it fronts on a condominium road. They will all be ground related. Everyone will have a front yard and backyard and 2 places to park 2 cars. We will have on-site parking and visitor parking for those who choose to visit the owners of the condominiums. And we have a complete road network, and this has been vetted through the Region of New York as far as our access points. As I can show you with regard to our neighbors, we are providing connections. Likely there might be some access to their site from Leslie Street, but we are providing the ability to access their site from the rear through what will be our ensuing site plan process. And fundamental or key to our development plans, and there will be some level of urgency, is our retirement home. That is key. We will be filing a site plan application probably within the next week, and if I don't, I'm going to get whooped. But we are that close to filing that, and we would like to see that proceed. That is the, I guess, the focal point of our community, and that is imminent. And to that end, I have with me here Mr. Mike Britsko. He's the Vice President of Property Development for Rivera, who is as I'm sure you're all aware, a well-known leading organization in providing services to the aging population. So with your indulgent, I'm going to ask him in a minute to come up and address you. And I hope that through this process, there's a quick phasing plan, and here's the lovely elevations, which I have posted just to ingrain it. And we have some, I'll say, somewhat modern town housing designs. We are a little behind in the site plan for the town housing, so that will be coming. So this will clearly change and improve, but just to give you a flavor of what that town housing component will look like. So it's our objective, Your Worship, to hopefully work with staff, file our applications, and we would dearly love to be able to get on the site for the retirement facility, hopefully towards the end of the year, and with a game plan to get a building permit next year. So I'll leave that with you. If you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them if I can. And if not, if I ask for Mr. Britsko to come up and address council, please. It's all yours.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of council, staff, and neighbors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. Rivera is very excited to have the opportunity to join the community in East Gwillimbury. We've invested a lot of resources already to incorporate the best of our knowledge, all the features and attributes which will represent a best-in-class seniors retirement home of the future. This is intended to incorporate a variety of levels of care, from an independent supportive living, assisted living, and purpose-built memory care components as well. That will be supported by a amenity platform that will provide the opportunity for future residents of the community and current members of the East Gwillimbury community to age in place over the fullness of time, as well as welcome the residents of the larger community into our spaces. We truly have a mission of social value creation and intend to be here for many, many years and add great value and jobs to East Gwillimbury. We're ready to go. We're excited to get moving on this, and thanks once again for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. At this point is an opportunity for the public to come up and speak. If you have questions of the presenters, we can facilitate those as well, get answers. And we're here to listen tonight. This is your meeting, public, to hear from you and the comments that you will have about this proposal.
Hello, I'm a resident, and I'm just curious.
Before you start, could you just give us your name, please?
Right, my name is Lynn Hallinan, and I live on Festival Court, which backs onto this new development. There's green space in between, but my question or comment really is for Wycliffe Thornridge in relation to the townhouses. I was wondering if you had considered, and if you haven't, I would request that you might consider the aging population that maybe isn't quite able to accommodate 2-3-story buildings, and look at some townhouses that are 1-story that could be accessed by people with physical disabilities or who are aging and aren't quite as great on stairs. Okay.
Thank you. Perhaps we'll hear from, if you can keep a list of your questions, and then we'll have you come back up once all of our residents have been able to express their concerns or their comments. Is there anyone else? Come up to the microphone, please, and if you could just give your name.
Hello, I'm Lauren Stephanoff. I live on Beachboro Crescent on the other side of Mount Albert. And if you could just maybe go back to the slides where of your presentation, where the entrance is. So it looks like you've got an entrance off of Leslie and Mount Albert. Yeah. So the entrance that you have off of Mount Albert, it looks like there's also an entrance a little ways down to the subdivision that this resident lives in, a little further west. Is that right? There's another entrance. No, but there is a roadway. How many meters is that away? And is there like a future traffic light going anywhere? No. I understand there's a walkway there. Exactly. So how many meters is there between those two roadways?
Perhaps our staff could answer that for you. I'm not sure if we can.
Because that's a really short distance between, like, Leslie, the new entranceway into the new subdivision, and the existing one.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
We'll see if we can get an answer for you. Okay.
Through the chair, I don't know the distance between that area, but I can look into it and get back to the resident if I need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Ramona?
Through you, Madam Mayor, at this point, the region will be involved in the actual location and design of those entrances, so they'll need to be satisfied. Again, just, eyeballing it, looks like it's, between 100 to 150 meters. At this point, we haven't heard from the region whether either of those entrances will be signalized at this point, but that's something that we'll need to verify with them, whether any of those entrances will be signalized, at a future date. But we will certainly confirm that separation distance, and that is a requirement that we'll need the region to weigh in on. As the applicant mentioned, they've already had some discussions with the region with respect to designing the conceptual site plan and where the region wants those access points on Mount Albert and Leslie Street to be. So that will be verified at a future report.
Mr. Ramuno, because they're both Mount Albert Road and Leslie Street are York Region roads, do they have regulations or stipulations from the four corners at the Mount Albert Road and Leslie, how far away the next light needs to be?
To you, Madam Mayor, yes, it's a good question, and the region does. They typically have a formula. They want to ensure that there's, approximately 200 meters between sort of signalized entrances. And the other thing that they want to ensure, council is aware of the application on the south side of Mount Albert, and the region is going to ensure that those two entrances, access points, align. So this entrance that you see on the north side of Mount Albert related to this application will likely align with any entrance to the south side that will service that future development. So that's something that the region is will ensure occurs to eliminate the number of entrances along the original roads.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come to the microphone? Residents asking any questions? Welcome. Good to have you with us tonight.
Hi, my name is Azita Khorassani. I just have a question in regards to the back of our house. It's the 19168. There is an area, I don't really know what that is. I don't.
Perhaps if we could have the light just to show where you're referring to.
Is this the one? Oh, okay. I am talking about this.
The closeness, you know?
Yeah, like what is it? What's in there? Sorry.
Per-
Through the chair, that's just a landscaping.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. Now's the time to get the answers. Anyone else? Questions, concerns, comments? I'm not seeing any others. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just because the residents in question aren't here, but I've had at least 2 residents of the subdivision, Countryman and Festival Court, who have reached out to me inquiring about the connection, and I think Ms. Stephanoff raised it, the connection between Countryman, the regional trail, and this access point, in particular, getting people safely from Festival Park down the trail and across Mount Albert Road. And so I'm not sure that it necessarily relates to this site plan, but having an awareness of how to get people and pedestrians and cyclists safely across to connect to the trail system that is on the south side as well. So just having in mind to how that whole intersection may function in future would be appreciated. As I said, there's 2 residents who've reached out to me, have not, they aren't here tonight, so I'm doing this on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. I know you've been taking some notes. Do you have some answers for us now?
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you.
Just a few commentaries with regard to, I'll say, the consideration of bungalows. The answer is sadly no, but as I had indicated, we're quite proud that this is a complete community. So we believe that any of the, shall I say, accessibility challenged folks, such as guys like me with bad knees and people who maybe need assistance, we believe that will be taking place in our 7-story apartment building, where there'll be ramps, accessible units, elevators. So we believe that will be the appropriate location. We're anticipating traditional townhouses for the rest of it. So we have thought about it, and that's where we believe that opportunity will exist. With regard to the access location, I'll just repeat what Mr. Ramuno indicated, that we have been having discussions with the region. That access point is where they want it. So our experts and their experts have looked at it. They've all shaken hands. They believe it's safe. And and as you just heard from Mr. Ramuno, when the property to the south develops, that will likely be the joint point of access to that site. And then will there be warrant which will exist to facilitate the signalization of that intersection? And response to your question is yes, there is a standard. It's usually around 250. They tend to play with it when it suits the region. But we have met that standard. So this meets their standards completely. And lastly, with regard to the connections, yes, we are to provide a connection for pedestrian and cycling into the trail system, which will complement the access from the other locations. So we are working on integrating our community with everyone else. And I believe that's the comments that I heard.
Thank you very much. Just one last ask if there is anyone else that has any questions before we close off this meeting. I'm not seeing any others. I would invite you, if you get home and you think that there's something else you thought about, send it in to the town office, and it certainly will be addressed at an appropriate time. I know sometimes you get home, you think I should have asked, or you think about it after as you're having a look at some of the areas there. So don't hesitate to be in touch with our staff, who will make sure that you do get answers to all of your questions. I have a motion that I will read out, and we'll move forward. Be it resolved that the presentation and comments during the statutory public meeting regarding the official plan amendment application for 19180 Leslie Street and zoning bylaw amendment application for 19180 Leslie Street, 1420, 1432, 1442, 1452, 1460, 1472, and 1484 Mount Albert Road, and blocks 107, 108, 109, 10, 11, and 13 on 65M 2512, north of Mount Albert Road, west of Leslie Street in Sharon, part of Lot 12, Concession 2, submitted by Wycliffe, Thornridge, Sharon Corners, files OPA 1901 and ZBA 1901 be received. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persichini, Councillor Crone. Any questions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. I'm now going to move to item number E on the agenda, and that's a statutory public meeting regarding development charge background study and bylaw. And Mr. Muno, would you be making comments, or would it be a member of staff? Oh, very good. Mr. Valcic, please.
Madam Mayor, this evening we will be having our statutory public meeting for the development charges study, and staff will shortly highlight where this fits into our entire process. But I do want to make a couple of introductory comments, if I can, before I turn it over to our staff. In most municipalities across the province, the statutory public meeting represents the first point of consultation with the development industry in terms of putting together the growth-related capital plan, background study, and ultimately the charges that council considers as part of the bylaw. In EG, we do things quite differently in that regard. We started our process of development of the capital plan almost a year ago. It's been informed by an internal working team of our extended management team, and all of the master plans, both completed and in progress, has been an important part of informing the capital plan. And several months ago, we established a developer working committee with several prominent folks from the development industry in East Gwillimbury to work with us in the development of that plan. And that working committee also consisted of two hired consultants on the behalf of the industry to provide subject matter expertise from their perspective on the development of the product that we're about to present to you this evening. So a lot of work has gone into to this to date, but this kicks off the mandatory public meeting as per the development charges legislation. I'm pleased to, at this point, introduce our Director and Deputy Treasurer, Mr. Marshall, and our Manager of Development Finance, Ms. Brown, and they will do a presentation for you just to give you an overview of the key elements of the development charge bylaw and study that you have received. I believe it was about a week ago that we handed out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Marshall to start off the formal presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. The presentation this evening, in this presentation, I'm going to give a brief overview and background of the town's development charges, and then I'll be passing it off to Ms. Brown, who will be getting into the details regarding the calculation of the proposed development charge rates and associated bylaw. So development charges are one of the key tools that municipalities have to make sure that the costs associated with servicing growth are paid for by the new development that has created the need for those services. So that's typically known throughout as growth paying for growth. So these charges that are imposed on new development can only be used to fund growth-related capital costs. So the costs associated with ongoing operations, repair, and eventual replacement of assets cannot be funded from DCs. So typically other sources of funding are required, and those, the main ones are tax levy, user rates, and third-party funding such as grants and subsidies. So the town has acknowledged the importance of using development charges in ensuring growth pays for growth by linking the use of development charges in the official plan with the funding principle of growth paying for growth. So objectives, there are some objectives that are entrenched in the official plan that call for using development charges, and there's actually a section in the official plan that sets out policies that use development charges and links it to making sure that growth pays for completing communities. So in order to collect development charges, municipalities have to do a couple things, including creating a background study that calculates the proposed charge that would be imposed on development. And we have to enact a bylaw to actually impose those charges. The legislation restricts the amount of time that you can have a bylaw to a 5-year term. So the town enacted its current bylaw on June 2nd, 2014, which means we have to pass a bylaw by June 2nd, 2019 in order to continue to collect development charges. So there was an amendment done in 2016 to update some costs, but amendments do not factor into the term of the bylaw, so therefore we still have to meet our 2019 or June 2nd, 2019 deadline. So as Mr. Valcic had mentioned, we've been working for the past year to update our current bylaw and get ready for our June 2nd deadline. So the town also enacted an area-specific development charge bylaw on June 2nd, 2014 to collect costs associated with a water main in the Yonge and Green Lane area. So that water main is now completed and paid for, so there is no longer a need to have an area-specific bylaw for that infrastructure. But as well, the new legislation has indicated that a municipality has to consider whether area-specific bylaws should be used in the municipality. And we have taken a look, and staff are proposing that we don't, that it wouldn't be appropriate right now to have another area-specific bylaw. It wouldn't help us, so we're proposing that we just continue with a town-wide development charge bylaw. So although development charges are intended to pay for growth-related infrastructure, there are some pieces of infrastructure that are ineligible in accordance with the Act. So, for example, admin buildings are not allowed to be funded through development charges. And as well for many capital service areas, there's a mandatory 10% contribution that municipalities must make for growth-related infrastructure. So even though it's 100% growth-related, the municipality has to pay 10% of those costs. So typically, most municipalities would have to go to tax levy or user rates to fund those ineligible services. But the town is unique in that we have implemented a community capital contribution charge, which is intended to help fill the gap for those ineligible services. So unlike the current DC bylaw, the CCC is not expiring on June 2nd, so we have not included any of those costs in the review that we're doing for our current bylaw. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Ms. Brown to get into some details regarding the actual development charge calculation.
Thank you very much. Today is not only our statutory public meeting, but it's also a council information session. So we are going to get into the weeds a little bit, but I hope you find it interesting and informative, and I hope it helps. The process of calculating development charges is prescribed by legislation, the Development Charges Act. So you'll hear me say a number of times tonight, as per the legislation, but it really is our guiding document, and we do have to abide by its very specific conditions and requirements. The legislation specifies, among other things, the services that are not eligible for DC funding. So even though there may be growth-related costs, we can't use DCs to fund them. Examples are tourism facilities, cultural facilities as well, public hospitals, landfill, general administration facilities like this building here. The legislation also prescribes the contents of a DC background study and bylaw, the appeal period, which is 40 days following passage, and the public consultation requirements, one of which is this meeting we're having tonight. In accordance with the legislation, we've had a very consultative process, as Mark alluded to. We'll go through the specific steps that we followed to assure you that we are in compliance with the Act. But here's a summary. The Development Charges Act requires us to forecast the amount, type, and location of development that we're anticipating in the municipality over determined planning periods. We've used the Region of York's forecast projections, which align also with our transportation, water, and wastewater master servicing plans. DCs must be calculated to service new development at the same rate as the existing community, which is measured by service levels. So we have established service levels for all eligible categories, and they're detailed in our background study, but I'll touch on that throughout the presentation as well. We're then tasked with identifying the projects that are required to service this growth. We have assembled our DC capital programs in consultation with staff, referencing our master plans, and they also reflect our ongoing master servicing plans for roads, water, and wastewater. We've calculated the charges by applying the growth-related costs to the new development anticipated on both the residential and non-residential side. We've highlighted here on the slide, just on the side there, that although it's not specifically required by the legislation, we've had a very consultative process. We've worked with a established working group, and we've discussed all inputs, all assumptions used, and it's resulted in the rates that we're presenting today. We're now in the public consultation phase. We published the background study and bylaw on the 22nd of March, and we're having our statutory meeting tonight, and then we hope to be able to pass the bylaw in the next month. So as I mentioned, our forecast of development is based on the Region of York's preferred growth scenario, which provides estimates of population and employment in the census years between 2016 and 2041, so that's every 5 years. We've made adjustments to the region's forecast. We've delayed a little bit of population, dwelling unit, and employment growth beyond the 10-year planning period. We've done this to account for delays in the UISS infrastructure, the limited allocation that we have here in the town, as well as a slowing market. For the purposes of this DC study, we've assumed that the UISS infrastructure will be in place by 2027. We have maintained consistency with the region's projections for the 2031, 2036, and 2041 census years. I'd just like to point out that the forecast figures here that we're going to be presenting are for the purposes of calculating development charges only, and they may differ from the projections you've seen for planning purposes. We forecasted the census, or the net population growth, over 2 planning periods. The 10-year planning period is used for general services, and the planning period out to 2041 is for engineered services, and I'll specify what exactly that means in a little bit. In the next 10 years, we're expecting about 5,300 additional units, 70% of which are likely to be single or semi-detached units. These are the remaining units within our available allocation, or what's often referred to here as our 7,900 units. Population growth in these new units over the next 10 years will add about 19,000 people to the town. And this figure has been calculated based on occupancy factors for the dwelling unit forecast. Between 2018 and 2041, we expect to build about 27,790 new units, which will be occupied by more than 100,000 more people. On the non-residential side, we're expecting about 3,200 employees. I know this is a bit hard, isn't it? To start working here in EG between 2018 and 2027, and this figure increases to more than 29,000 by 2041. The additional employees are going to generate approximately 2 million square feet of non-residential building space in the next 10 years, almost half of which will be on employment land-related uses. Out to 2041, this increases to almost 20 million square feet. So we are achieving the region's projections, and we hope that they're accurate. The Development Charges Act provides municipalities with flexibility in determining which services will be included in the DC regime, so long as they do have growth-related expenditures and they don't fall within that list of ineligible services that I mentioned earlier. The town of East Gwillimbury has quite a comprehensive list of services that we include. They're listed here. The roads, water, and wastewater is what we often refer to as engineered services. So those are the ones that we look out to 2041 for our growth-related needs. And then the remaining services are the general services, and we look at the needs over the next 10 years. That's prescribed by the legislation, and we don't have much say in that. So our growth-related capital needs for all of these service categories are included in the DC calculation and will be funded through development charges in the future. As I mentioned, Section 5 of the DCA requires that development charges be used to service the new community at the same rate as the existing community. And this is based on historical service levels. This is defined in the Development Charges Act as the average level of service provided over the 10-year period preceding the background study. Service levels take into consideration both the quality and quantity of assets that are provided to service the community, and they're established as a cost per capita or a cost per population and employee, depending on the nature of the service. And then they're applied to the growth that we're anticipating to establish a cap on the amount that we can fund through development charges going forward. Only some categories are subject to this requirement. Some services like water and wastewater they don't have a cap, and their needs are based on health and safety standards. The capital programs included in our DC study are based on consultation with staff and consultants, and they reflect the infrastructure needed to service future development in East Gwillimbury. We align the programs with our 2019 budget and business plan, master plans such as the Health and Active Living Plan, the Emergency Services Report, and we also work closely with representatives from HDR and WSP to incorporate the works in our Transportation, Water, and Wastewater Master Plan. It's important for us to align the DC study with these master servicing plans because we want to make sure that the growth-related infrastructure proposed in those studies is appropriately funded from growth-related sources. Got some more numbers here. This chart presents a summary of the costs that are associated with our growth-related program. And so as you can see, to properly service the growing town of EG, we're going to have to spend more than $640 million. As mentioned, the Development Charges Act requires that a number of deductions are made to these capital costs. Alternative funding sources and grants that are available total $6.56 million. The shares of projects that benefit the existing community or will replace an existing asset, and the 10% required discount for select services total a combined $79 million, and these will need to be funded from alternative sources, so non-DC sources. Our available reserves that can help fund these project costs total $38.36 million. And lastly, the share of projects that will benefit development beyond the planning period under review or that exceed that average service level that I talked about, they total $32.14 million. As a result, the net DC eligible costs that are included in the calculation of the charge is $485.82 million. We'll see a breakdown amongst the service categories on the next slide, but in general, the most significant costs are associated with building and funding our Health and Active Living Plaza, our Operations Center, and completing our townwide road network. As you can see, the roads capital program is the largest share of our DC eligible costs, representing 42% of the total. Wastewater infrastructure is the next most significant share at 29%. Combined, the general services represent 23% of the costs, with indoor and outdoor recreation being the most significant by far within those categories. Here we have the proposed residential development charges. We've calculated a rate of $33,885 per single or semi-detached unit. So that's an increase of about $10,000 per unit over the charges that we're currently levying. Residential development charges are calculated by allocating the residential share of those DC eligible costs that we just looked at to the future population growth in new units. That gives us a cost per capita or a charge per capita, which is then translated into a charge per dwelling unit by type based on occupancy factors. The theory here is that larger units will likely have more inhabitants and they'll place more demand on municipal servicing, therefore they should be charged a higher rate. And we can see that the smaller units are charged at a lower rate. We initially presented rates to our working group in February, which were higher than these rates that you're seeing now. After some discussion, we made some adjustments to our methodology, and we actually lowered the recommended rates. We've gained support from the working group on the rates we're presenting today. None of them are here, but I'm sure if they were, they would say that they do support us. On the non-residential side, we're also proposing a bit of an increase. The proposed retail development charge of $10.56 per square foot is an increase of $1.74. and the proposed DCs for non-residential development other than retail commercial of $4.92 is an increase of $2.23. This slide shows the residential development charges in force currently in York Region. So this is for a single or semi-detached home, as you can see. The dark blue portion, the difference isn't that dramatic, but the dark blue is the York Region charge. Education development charges are shown in green, and then the lighter blue is the lower tier component. As you can see, EG is currently at the high end of the middle range, and the proposed increase doesn't impact our position on the chart. You'll note that both Newmarket and Richmond Hill are currently in the process of updating their background studies, so they'll be passing bylaws later this year. We don't know what their rates are yet, so this is what they've got in force today. They might be changing. Here's the retail rate comparison. Our calculated rate of $10.56 a square foot bumps East Gwillimbury just over King Township. We're at the higher end of the York Region municipalities on the retail side, but I would like to point out the significance of the regional charge and its impact on the overall amount that developers are paying when they pull a retail building permit. On the non-retail side, the increase brings us from the very bottom of the chart up to sort of the low end of the middle range. Also included in our DC background study is the proposed 2019 bylaw. We've made a couple of changes from the current bylaw, mostly to align with regional practice and language where appropriate. This makes the administration of development charges much more straightforward. We cleaned up the bylaw, we removed unneeded definitions, we clarified those that were causing confusion. We added definitions for group homes, mobile homes, private schools. We adjusted the large versus small apartment threshold size from 650 square feet to 700 square feet to align with the region as well as most of the lower tiers. We changed the time frame for what is considered a temporary use from 1 year to 3 years. This aligns with our zoning bylaw. And we clarified language around redevelopment provisions and credits that would be eligible for demolished properties. Since the process began in July of last year, we've been working collaboratively with our working group. The working group had representation from local developers, their consultants, Build, as well as our extended management team members here at the town. We were able to acknowledge them and thank them for their contributions at our stakeholder meeting last week. There was a lot of effort put into the study, including regular meeting attendance, ongoing phone and email correspondence, as well as thorough review of a lot of materials. In summary, we had 7 formal meetings. We provided 3 update memos to council. We circulated a number of information packages, and as I mentioned, we presented at the stakeholder developer info session last week. So what's next? We're currently in the public consultation phase, so we're happy to gain the support of the working group, but we continue to be open to feedback and receiving submissions and questions and responding accordingly. Next, we'll be bringing forward a report to CWC on May 7th with any updates and letting you know if any changes have been made, and we'll also ask that the bylaw be endorsed. And then on May 22nd, we'll bring forward the bylaw again to council, hoping to pass it at that meeting and have the rates effective on June 1st. As per the development charges, we will be sending out a notice of passing, which confirms when the bylaw was passed, when the rates are effective, what the rates are, where they're going to be levied, as well as the end of the appeal period, which to clarify is 40 days after passing. So that brings us to July 1st. So thanks for your attention, and we'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Very thorough. Questions of members of council? Councillor Roy DiClemente, then Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Wow, this was, I think, probably one of the most informative mini workshops we've had. I've learned a lot in this short period of time. Thank you very much, both of you. I did have a question about the deductions. So you said that of that amount, there were certain deductions that needed to be made, the 10% discount, the benefit to existing development, and then there was less reserve funds, so the 38.36 million. Is that because we're already holding money in reserve that we can't, so we've collected in advance of what we're going to need? I feel like we're being penalized for having money in the bank in our DC.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I think the purpose of that deduction is the development charges are a zero-sum game. So if we've collected development charges, they're intended to be used for all those capital works. So that 38 million is earmarked for specific works that we have to use. So that's why it's removed from that calculation.
And so through you, those works we've already been collecting for some of those works, and so therefore we're going to need to deduct that value. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so
Okay.
some of the works are over like the 40-year or the 20-year period, and since bylaws are only 5 years, some of them will carry forward. So.
Okay, I have another one if I may. The capital program summary, where you've given us the pie chart and then you've broken out the general services. Fire and emergency is really only showing at about a 2%. Where in the DC does I would assume that in order to address this considerable growth that you're collecting for, that a new station and new equipment would total more than just 2% of the overall DC that you're collecting. Can you tell me where in the DC the new station, the fourth station, and the equipment that we would be required for it is sitting, please?
Sure. Through you, Madam Mayor. The new station, land for the new station is included in the 10-year plan. So we're proposing to collect for the new land, for the land associated with it. The construction is outside of that 10-year period, so we can't collect for that at this time. So that's why it's only a small component.
Through you, but what if we decide that we need to build it sooner than 10 years from now? We're seeing the growth now, and while our call volume may not have spiked at the moment, it could. And how do we address that?
So we can do an amendment to the bylaw and include those costs. That's what happened in 2016. We identified some costs that we needed to include, so we did an amendment to the bylaw. So that can be done.
Okay, thank you. And just a final comment, I was happy to see that our non-retail charge is still in the lower end in order to be able to attract investment. And I think that's an important piece, that as we start to do some economic development and we're trying to attract investment and bring in those jobs that we've projected, that we can point to that chart and say, you know what, our DCs are on the low end of the scale, and we continue to keep them there. Thank you.
Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to the staff. I'd just like to second Councillor Roy DiClemente's comments. That was very informative. Thank you. Very articulate. Couple of questions. I'm very curious. You mentioned that you had proposed some development charges to a developer group. I find it very comprehensible that they would say that it was too high and negotiated it down. I was curious what their rationale was for seeking a lower charge, other than no one likes paying more than they have to.
Through you, Madam Mayor. One of the biggest changes that we made following the release of the first version 1 rates, let's call them, was that we adjusted our planning period. We were initially looking at the engineered servicing needs out to 2031, and after discussing with the working group, we agreed that probably examining our needs out to 2041 was a better approach. Firstly, that aligned with our master servicing plans, and it also, you know, the difference between our 10-year period and our long-term period, you know, that difference was narrowing. The 10-year planning period takes us out to 2027, and 2031, there's not a lot of difference. So we looked out, we brought in a lot more projects and a lot more costing, but with that, we also increased the population and employment projections, so that resulted in a lower charge.
Mr. Valcic.
Madam Mayor, just wanted to clarify, just to add on to what Ms. Brown has said, it wasn't a negotiated reduction. It was a consultation process that involved the two consultants from the industry as well, looking at technical compliance with the legislation and sort of looking at, because there's a myriad of assumptions that are built in as staff project out what they deem to be relevant to the existing population, the growth population, the post-period population. And so we were comfortable with making some adjustments through those conversations, and we believe that what's being presented this evening is a fair and reasonable and appropriate charge. So I just wanted to clarify that process.
Madam Chair, through you, I do want to apologize. I did not mean to infer that there was a negotiation. It was, you give somebody a chance to talk about paying less for something, well, they're going to take it. So, but I appreciate the answer that was given to us. If I could go back, one more question, if I might, on page back to slide 15, the capital program summary. If I'm looking at this correctly, the DC charges will cover about 75% of our capital project. Is this based on the new proposed or the existing DC charges?
Through you, this is based on the proposed charges.
Okay. So if we're covering 75%, we have to find the remaining 25% through non-DC, like property taxes and user fees, things like that. Am I correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So that's where the community capital contributions come in as well. So that will fill a lot of the gap between those ineligible costs. So I would take the majority of it out.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just further to Councillor Crone's question through you, what are we proposing to collect as far as CCCs during this period, just to see what that gap is? Do we have a sense of that? Community capital contributions.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we haven't done that analysis, and we'd be happy to do that. Just a comment on this slide. The grants and subsidies is already dedicated money that will come from other sources, so that's not something that we'll have to find at a later time. The benefit to existing share and the 10% discount, as I mentioned, will have to be funded from other sources, of which CCCs, or capital community contributions, will be used. And then our reserve funds is money that we've already got. And then the post-period benefit share will be funded through future development charges. So it isn't such a bleak picture.
The grants and subsidies that are showing there, are these things that we're confident in? Because in many cases, government programs change and flex depending on who's in elected power, what government is in place. Are we confident with that number, or is it something that is subject to change based on a political will of a federal or provincial government?
Through you, Madam Mayor. It's always, there's always a chance that things change. We are fairly confident as it stands now that those are grants that we'd be able to use, but things change and we can't really tell. So.
I know we have June the 1st here for new rates in effect. And are we anticipating that when we pass our new rates, well, we're going to consider them on the 7th and pass proposed pass on the 22nd. Do we expect a flood of people coming through this door to get permits prior to June the 1st?
Through you, Madam Mayor. No, we're not anticipating a flood. There's a couple of reasons. One, we've been doing this process for a long time now, so people are aware that the rates are going to be going up. So if they're getting close to pulling any type of permit, they'd be accelerating that now. So.
And it certainly is the drop dead date if people are contemplating and they're not quite ready and it's going to be the 1st of August, they've missed the boat?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Webster?
Madam Mayor, I've been in the development charges game for quite a while, since the early 90s, and I think staff are being a little understated here, so I'd like to just clarify something for a minute. So there's a lot of numbers here. This is a perfect workshop topic, as a matter of fact, and I think that it was said tonight that when you have so many numbers and so much detail, it's nice to be in public session, but what I can assure you is the whole concept of the community capital contribution. And that's something that CCC, it's called. And I think we're one of the few municipalities in Ontario that has that. And we actually borrowed it from Whitchurch Stouffville, which our writer would be familiar with, and they've used it to fund a cultural center and a few other things. And we looked at it a little more holistically because we didn't think it was fair that existing development and 10% discounts and things like that were fair to the existing people when you have a growth pays for growth mantra. And essentially, a high level calculation, I believe our current community capital charge is about $3,500 per unit. And if you look at our growth to 2041, there'll be about 20,000 additional units if we are looking at a number in the range of about 90,000. That's about $70 million. And that's very significant money that staff have worked with our councils that have supported that and worked with the industry. So I would like to offer council the ability that even though this is on a statutory timeline for approval and endorsement and adoption, I think that in a coming workshop it would be very interesting to take a look at some of the things. Do we have the timing for some of our key projects like the Green Lane fire station, for instance? Are the bricks and mortars in the right time frame? And how are we financing our go forward? And statutory timelines have certain times that maybe we're a little constricted tonight, so maybe we'd give our staff an opportunity to really walk through these different categories and talk about how we're funding them in a responsible manner. So I think that would be helpful and hopefully would give council some assurance that we're in good financial hands.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent suggestion. I'll leave it with you staff to work out a schedule on that. I'm seeing some nods here that this for many members of council, if not all, we don't work in these numbers on a regular basis. And so to hear it 2 or 3 times, it certainly cements it for us when we're able to articulate it to our community. So thank you. It's an excellent presentation. Are there any other questions? Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I have a resolution printed. Be it resolved that the presentation comments during the statutory public meeting regarding the development charges study be received. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roy DiClemente, Councillor Procedural, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, staff. Very informative. Item F is a statutory public meeting regarding building permit, bylaw, and fee charge changes.
Yeah, to you, Madam Mayor. So this last public meeting item is the building bylaw and fee changes. Council received the report in March, and our Deputy CBO provided a presentation. He'll be providing a same presentation this evening for the purpose of the public meeting, and the intent is to have that bylaw in front of council for enactment at the May 7th council meeting. I'll turn it over to Andres.
Good to have you in front of us.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, members of the public. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present our proposed bylaw. It is required by legislation to have this public meeting. Would you open to the presentation? No? It's okay, I came prepared. These slides are based on the original slides that you saw in March. So a brief history. Our existing bylaw is reportedly some 35 years old. Over that period of time, both the Building Code Act and the Ontario Building Code had numerous definitions added and new permit classes as well as permits identified, namely the occupancy permits. Some of the major changes in our bylaw, we've defined the authority for the chief building official to enter into various agreements, such as conditional permits and covenants agreements. We've updated the fee schedule. It is now a comprehensive fee schedule under one of the schedules, so everything is in one place. It's a lot more straightforward for anyone coming into the building department trying to apply for a permit. It is cumulative and easier to figure out for our staff as well. We've detailed submission requirements. So we've specified the types of drawings that are required for various types of building permit applications. There's no confusion anymore over the phone or coming in at the front counter as to what is actually required to be submitted. We revised and added new definitions into the bylaw to harmonize the definitions with the Building Code and the Building Code Act. And we added new classes of permits, such as shoring, underpinning, repair garages, park model trailers, and so on. We're essentially trying to bring our bylaw up to speed with what everyone else has. We differentiated between permits. So under the Building Code Act, there are various construction permits. Those are classes of permits. However, under the Ontario Building Code, which is the regulation under the Building Code Act, we have occupancy permits. Those are not, in fact, classes of permits. They're separate. Unfortunately, most municipalities do not distinguish between the two. However, this is our opportunity to do so. We've simplified our refund policy. Our current bylaw is a mixture of refund and retention policies, and it's quite confusing. Our current bylaw simplifies it depending on how far along the building permit process you go. That's the amount of refund that you get. We've also identified new processes for alternative solution applications, model home permit applications, and so on. Some of the other major changes, we referenced the demolition plan requirements under the Professional Engineers Act. This is to account for demolitions in confined areas, such as the Uptown Theatre collapse in Toronto. So now, with these demolition plans, it'll allow our businesses to remain operational when there's a demolition adjacent to that business. We're also moving forward to an electronic submission and inspection process. So hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be able to extend our services to the electronic format. So with the updated bylaw, we've made our processes more transparent. Our permit fees remain unchanged, We did, however, add new classes of permits just to catch up with everyone else. The house plumbing fees are now a flat rate. So instead of adding up all the fixtures, my apologies, fixtures in a house, now the builders can come in with one fee for the plumbing. Plumbing repairs and replacements are also now a flat fee. So this is for existing businesses. It makes no sense to charge a linear foot for fixing a pipe when we already know where the pipe is. So we're trying to help our local businesses out that way. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Crone.
Just a question about the building permits, and maybe this is not a fair question, but I'll ask it anyways. Do we set a time frame for our building permits?
I assume it's a turnaround to issue a permit?
No. I'll give you the reason behind my question is I've noticed in particular, and I know it happens all over the community, but in one street in Mount Albert, there's a house that is being built, and it has been under construction for well over a year to the detriment of neighbors, although I'm sure the contractor is very friendly and nice and tries to keep everyone happy. But still, it's unoccupied and it's under construction. Do we not set a time frame in which building must be completed? Because I could see this could be subject to abuse time and again. Forgive me if it was an unfair question.
It's perfectly fair, and thank you for the question. I'll address both the pre-permit part and the after-permit part. So in this new bylaw, we are going to deal with permit applications that are just left abandoned. So someone comes in for a permit under an order and never chooses to pursue the permit in reality. So now we go through a dormant process for a permit, at which point the applicant gets notified. And after the 6 months, it'll be an abandoned permit application. As far as permits that have already been issued, under the Building Code Act, the chief building official has the authority to revoke the permit if it hasn't substantially started. That being said, for anything that is under construction, it is not, there's nothing in the act or the regulation that prohibits someone from taking longer than usual. That being said, we do have the discretion to issue orders if necessary to either revoke the permit or to have the applicant come in and revise their application or get them going.
Just want to just add to that just for 1 second. In addition to that, where a person has already started, unless they have abandoned construction once they've started for a period of 12 months, then we can't do anything about it. But if it can be shown that there's been no construction or no activity for a 12-month period, we can then revoke that permit. But that's the only stipulation once they've started construction. We have lots of, I have lots of applications right now in some of the rural areas where they're building $3-4 million houses, and those things take 2 years or more. So.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that not every project is the same. From what I'm hearing, though, if the act, which is covered by the province, I presume, so we are restricted within the act, other than occasionally bringing some folks in to encourage them to speed up their construction.
I mean, ultimately, our goal is to achieve compliance with the building code. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes longer. I have cases where it's honestly an 80-year-old man building his house by himself, and it just doesn't go fast. So, as you can understand. So, I mean, we use our discretion, but to that end, we try to ensure that people don't abuse the system.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, I have a resolution. Be it resolved that the presentation comments during the statutory public meeting regarding the building permit bylaw and fee changes be received. Moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Roy DeClemente. All those in favor? And that's carried. We are at item G for deputations, and I'm not seeing any. Mr. Clerk, is that correct?
Correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item H is committee recommendations. That's page 35 to 38. Any questions on those? Go ahead, please.
I'd just like to separate out number 079 for a separate vote. Not recorded, just a separate vote, please. Just for purposes of consistency from what I did in Committee of the Whole. Thank you.
Very good. So if I could have a motion to receive all with the exception of 7-9, moved by Councillor Carruthers, seconded by Councillor Persichini. All those in favor? And that's carried. And a motion for 79, moved by Councillor Crone, seconded by Councillor Foster. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. We are at adoption of minutes. Sorry, go ahead.
Through Madam Mayor, just to bring the recommendation with regards to the Joint Legal and Counsel Support Services Corporate CPRC Joint Report on Council Chamber Community Engagement Improvement Project, and that was to be ratified tonight. And that council authorized the budget and improvements to the council chambers as outlined in the report.
Thank you. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Morton, Councillor Persichini. Any questions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay. We have adoption of the minutes.
I'll move it.
Moved by, are you moving
I'll move all.
all of the 1, 2, and 3?
Yep.
Councillor Persichini, seconded by Councillor Morton. Any questions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Correspondence for consideration. We have a letter regarding the ban on GO train whistles, and we have a resolution that is asking council to direct staff to report back with additional information regarding the decision to ban GO train whistle blowing. I think there are a number of communities that have decided to ban it, and we have a number of communities that we in close proximity that have pursued it and chosen not to. So I'm hoping that we have a balanced approach when we come back. With that, do I have a mover and a seconder regarding that? Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Foster. All those in favor? That's carried. Item K, there are no reports at this time. Item L, there are no resolutions, bylaws. There are none at this time. Other business at this time. Item O is the confirming bylaw. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Morton, Councillor Carruthers. All those in favor? And that's carried. And an adjournment at 8:49, moved by Councillor Crone, seconded by Councillor Carruthers. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, staff. Thank you.